short video explains the Billings Ovulation Method, which is a natural method of fertility regulation. The woman is taught to observe and interpret her own signs of infertility and fertility, and to record these on a chart in symbols or colours. The couple is given the guidelines which apply to this information for the achieving or avoidance of pregnancy according to their requirements and wishes. By means of this slide rule, I would like to explain the principal events of a fertile woman's menstrual cycle of average length, about 4 weeks. Individual cycles vary considerably, but the principles and the rules for regulating fertility remain the same. The cycle begins with menstruation and ends with the beginning of the next menstruation. The white section represents fertility, when the sperm can live in the secretion of cervical mucus recognized by the woman at the vulva. She is aware of the presence by the sensation that it produces, and also by its appearance as it leaves the vagina just as she walks around. Ovulation, which occurs on only one day in each cycle, is represented here close to the peak of fertility. The peak becomes a familiar sign to the woman. Ovulation is followed by menstruation 2 weeks later. This menstruation was caused by ovulation 2 weeks before. When she's at the beginning of the cycle, she cannot estimate when she will ovulate. She will learn to recognize the mucus as the sign which announces the approach of ovulation and tells her when she can become pregnant. Rhythm calculation or counting days is unreliable because the cycles vary in length due to ovulation occurring early or late in the cycle. The early part of the cycle is short when ovulation is early, and late when ovulation is, or long when ovulation is late. The timing of ovulation affects the early part of the cycle only, as the cycles all end up the same way, 2 weeks to menstruation. Even if a woman's cycles have been fairly regular throughout most of her reproductive life, when she approaches menopause, they usually become very irregular, short and long. A woman who is breastfeeding may not have cycles at all for many weeks or months. When cycles return following weaning, they may be irregular for some time. Ovulation may occur early, even before the bleeding or menstruation is finished. The mucus will be obscured by bleeding. Intercourse during heavy bleeding may result in conception. Close observation will reveal the mucus as the bleeding becomes less, indicating early ovulation. Menstruation 2 weeks later will confirm this early ovulation, and the cycle is short. The basic infertile pattern, when conception cannot occur, is observed before the mucus begins in the early part of the cycle. This is an unchanging pattern, either dry, seen here in green, or an unchanging discharge, seen here in yellow. The pattern changes. This is represented here by the beginning of the white section and continues as a changing pattern leading to the peak of fertility, represented here by this cross. This peak of fertility is very close to ovulation. The egg lives for about 12 to 24 hours When the egg is dead, the woman is infertile for the remainder of the cycle. The post-ovulatory part of a fertile cycle does not vary in length outside 11 to 16 days. For the avoidance of pregnancy, there are 3 early day rules which apply to the cycle from menstruation to the peak, and the peak rule which applies from the peak until menstruation. For the achievement of pregnancy, the time of maximal fertility around the peak is selected for intercourse. No matter what the fertility problem is, the knowledge will give the couple the best possible chance of conception. The observations are these. While the woman keeps the first record for 2 to 4 weeks, the couple is requested to avoid all genital contact so that her observations will not be confused by seminal fluid or other stimulated secretions. The 2 observations are what she feels at the vulva when she is in the upright position and what she sees, if anything. Some fertile women do not see any mucus, but even a small quantity can be felt. Internal investigations are not made. When teaching a nervous woman in order to dispel anxiety, ask her, how do you know when menstruation begins? I can feel it and see it, she will say. Ask, have you ever felt something and upon inspection have been surprised because it is not bleeding? Yes, she will say after some thought. And then ask her to describe what she feels and sees. She realizes that this is an easy and natural observation and loses her fear. You can then explain to the couple that this mucus is the essential ingredient for fertility. Without it, the sperm will not survive and pregnancy will not happen. Encourage the woman to keep an accurate daily chart, recording with symbols at night the events of the day, using her own words and writing 2 or 3 words if literate. In this way, she will know from day to day whether pregnancy is possible or not. When teaching, do not overload with unnecessary information. Each woman is an individual. Listen to her. The follow-up interview is usually in 2 weeks' time. Typically, she may find, if her cycle is about 35 days or less, that she has several days of an unchanging pattern following menstruation. There are 2 possible patterns. She will have only one in an average length cycle. Either all dry, recorded here in green, or a discharge which stays the same day after day before a change occurs, and that is recorded in yellow. These are the basic infertile patterns corresponding to low ovarian hormone levels. The cervix is plugged up with thick mucus, which is impenetrable to sperm cells during this time. The first point of change corresponds to a rise in estrogens. This stimulates the cervix to produce fluid mucus, which causes the plug to leave the cervix. The sensation at the vulva changes as the mucus flows to the outside. Now the sperm can enter the cervix. The change is from dry to no longer dry. This is easily identified. Or from an unchanging discharge to something else. For example, a change in sensation or appearance. This change should be observed in 3 successive cycles for certain identification. The change is recorded with a white baby stamp and signifies that conception is possible now. Genital activity of any sort can lead to pregnancy now. The change means wait. That is, no intercourse, no withdrawal, no contact, no condoms. The fertile phase. When the first change occurs, the woman has no idea when she will ovulate. She may have mucus for 5 or 6 days, or perhaps only half a day. The sperm survival depends on the presence of the mucus. Sperm may be preserved by the mucus for 2 or 3 days, even up to 5 days if the mucus is of good quality. When this change from the basic infertile pattern occurs, the sperm is admitted to the cervix and can now swim to the end of the fallopian tubes. Until this change occurs, the sperm are kept out in the vagina and die very quickly. The mucus is observed from day to day as a changing pattern due to the fact that various types of mucus in various proportions are leaving the cervix and will flow to the vulva. These different types of mucus are involved in sperm selection, nutrition, and progression. The woman may observe sticky, cloudy mucus to begin with, which may become clear and hang in loops. Later, she will notice that the slippery sensation often persists without anything to see. The vulva is now swollen, wet, and slippery just before a dramatic change occurs. This last day of wetness and slipperiness is the peak. Now there will be a change. There will be no swelling, no wetness or slipperiness. The vulva will be dry or sticky, and the mucus opaque during the next 3 days. There is no wetness or slipperiness after the peak. Ovulation occurs very close to the peak, either on the peak or very shortly afterwards, occasionally on the 2nd day following the peak. During these 3 days, the cervix is closing with thick mucus stimulated by the rise in progesterone. By the beginning of the 4th day, the cervix is completely closed to sperm cells. The egg cell is dead, and the woman is therefore infertile for the remainder of the cycle. There may be some mucus occurring in this part of the cycle. It is variable, but usually tends towards the thick and opaque variety, except just prior to menstruation, when it may develop some wetness in preparation for the opening of the cervix to allow the menstrual flow to occur. All this mucus is recorded with the symbol for infertility, yellow. Rules for the postponement of pregnancy. The rules are always the same for any length cycle and in all circumstances. The early day rules apply from menstruation to the peak. Rule 1, avoid intercourse during the days of heavy menstrual bleeding because bleeding could hide the mucus when ovulation is early. Rule 2, during the basic infertile pattern, intercourse is available on alternate evenings. On the day following intercourse, Seminal fluid could obscure the mucus, so time is allowed for the seminal fluid to disappear. This seminal fluid does not contain live sperm. The woman should be in the upright position before observations are made. Therefore, the evenings are recommended for intercourse. Rule 3. At the first sign of change from the basic infertile pattern, which may be of sensation or appearance of mucus or blood, avoid intercourse and wait and see. If the basic infertile pattern returns, wait 3 more days. In an average length cycle, after a day or 2, the changing pattern of fertility resumes and proceeds to the peak. And here you can see this occurring, a short disturbance, and then counting 3, and then the mucus proceeds to the peak. When ovulation is delayed, as in breastfeeding, the basic infertile pattern continues. But this may be interrupted by mucus or bleeding, and at this time the early day rule, wait and see, 1, 2, 3, is applied. The basic infertile pattern in cycles over 35 days may be all dry, continuous unchanging discharge over 2 weeks, observations in the absence of bleeding, unchanging discharge combined with the occurrence of dry days intermittently over 2 weeks, observations in the absence of bleeding. In such a long cycle, due to delayed ovulation, the basic infertile pattern is established over 2 weeks, observations without intercourse. The early day rule, wait and see, 1, 2, 3, is applied to any change. This shows a change of mucus. Therefore, wait and see. Next comes some bleeding. This is not menstruation. There is no preceding ovulation. The basic infertile pattern returns. Count 3. Resume intercourse on the 4th night and continue with alternate evenings as desired until the next change from the basic infertile pattern occurs. Continue this way until a peak is recognised and apply the peak rule. The basic infertile pattern may continue without changing until menopause is reached. The peak rule for the postponement of pregnancy. Intercourse is available from the beginning of the 4th day past the peak at any time. The egg is dead. Guidelines for the achieving of pregnancy are: observe the early day rules until the first point of change is recognised, and then wait until the mucus develops fertile characteristics, for example, the slippery sensation at the vulva. If intercourse occurs during this time of high fertility, the chances of conception are high. In the application of the method, each phase of the cycle should be regarded as having a positive value. The time of fertility, because of the possibility of bringing a baby into existence, and the phases of infertility because of the loving effects upon the marriage relationship. The Billings Ovulation Method is not a contraceptive where the idea of the child is eliminated. It cooperates with nature to achieve the wishes which the couple discusses and decides upon according to the information in the woman's chart, cycle after cycle. The method demonstrates the responsibility to the child, wife and husband by allowing fertility to go by without conception if for any one of many reasons they judge the time to be unwise. This time of waiting becomes a positive and responsible demonstration of human nature at its best, intelligent, free-acting and loving. The time is soon over and can be occupied by many thoughtful attentions to each other. The times of infertility, denied to all but human beings for close physical embrace, lose nothing in the quality of intercourse. Indeed, because of mutual accord and biological refreshment due to waiting, intercourse is enhanced physically and emotionally, and so the time of infertility assumes a positive meaning as well. It can provide a loving and generous opportunity for a woman to show her husband appreciation for his willingness to cooperate with her in their great family responsibility. Gentle discipline is not difficult in the light of the love and fidelity which develop in the marriage. All members of the family benefit.